What does it take to be a world champion, or to even fight for a UFC title? To get to the top of the sport, you need a lifetime of training and usually a black belt or two in some kind of martial art. The best fighters come from all different kinds of backgrounds, but generally have been training their entire lives or competing at the highest level. But there have been a few fighters who definitely did not start out their MMA careers in any kind of normal way, and those that did train and compete but didn't exactly do it at the highest level still found their way to the top of the sport. I'm Balor from MMA On Point. A big thanks to all our friends, the MMA OP Hall of Famers, who help make these videos possible. Right, listen up, fellas. We're gonna get them balls feeling fresh, son. Fresh. Thanks to Manscape, they've got your back, sack, and your crack covered. Head on over to Manscape and get yourself the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. Make sure you use the promo code MMA On Point and get yourself free international shipping, 20% off, and 2 gifts. Yeah, 2 free gifts, mate. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is an all-inclusive kit. It's got everything you need to feel clean and fresh. Hello? Yes, I need my balls shaved, please. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, the latest and greatest in men's grooming technology. They've taken it to a whole new level with their next-gen updated skin-safe blades. It's also got an updated trimmer blade and an interchangeable foil blade. And now it's even safer. You can easily pop it off and use the foil blade so you can get down to skin level. That is a close shave right there. One of my favorite things has always been the LED light. It's now even better, and of course it's still waterproof. Fresh. What else is in the box? Well, let's not forget about the Weed Whacker 2.0. It's for your ear, hair and nose. It's also waterproof, cordless, and also has skin-safe technology. Last but not least, you've got the Crop Soother and Crop Preserver. Any good farmer will tell you how important their crops are. One of them is a deodorant, one of them is a moisturizer, and they are perfectly paired together to give you the freshest sensation you have ever felt between your legs. But it doesn't stop there, alright. When you buy the Performance Package 5.0, you get yourself 2 free gifts as well. You get yourself a free pair of the Manscaped boxers, which are fantastic, let me tell you, and the Shed 2.0 to put everything else inside. And it's free! It's pretty goddamn good. So win-win, guys. So get yourself over to manscaped.com and get your hands on the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. And don't forget, you got to use the promo code MMA On Point. That's how you get the 20% off, the free international shipping, and the 2 free gifts. Your balls will thank you, and so will your missus. And these are 10 underqualified fighters who rose to the very top. Number 10, Balor Muhammad. The welterweight division has long been home to some of the best collegiate wrestlers we've ever had in MMA. Johnny Hendricks, Tyron Woodley, Josh Koscheck, Colby Covington, but the best wrestler ever was arguably GSP, who didn't even go through the collegiate system. Now, GSP had an extensive background in karate from a very early age, so he's not going to make this list. But someone else who turned into a fantastic wrestler who didn't do it at university was Balor Muhammad. At high school, Balor got some wrestling experience, but as he has said, he doesn't have the accolades of a Division I wrestler, or went to any special school, or even came from a wrestling family. At university, he didn't even finish his degree, and he definitely didn't wrestle. But he was able to reach the very top of the welterweight division using that wrestling. And he also beat a ton of really credentialed grapplers that on paper, you'd think he just wouldn't be able to. Guys like Damian Maia, he then arguably controlled and grappled Wonderboy Thompson better than the Jiu-Jitsu world champion Gilbert Burns. He landed 7 takedowns in that one. Don't forget, he also took the O away from the undefeated Sean Brady and completely stopped his wrestling game, and recently even beat Gilbert Burns, one of the most credentialed grapplers in the history of the division. Despite not having any other martial arts background to lean on or having the same wrestling pedigree as many of the division's greats, Balor has used it to effectively reach top contender status. Number 9, Brock Lesnar. Now, we've just gone from a guy in Balor who didn't wrestle at university to someone in Brock Lesnar who is actually probably one of the more decorated guys to compete in MMA. Brock wrestled and played football throughout his early athletic career at university, his first big achievement coming in 2000 when he won the Division I Wrestling Championship. He also won at other tournaments and events and posted a final record of 106-5 after 4 years, which is really impressive.
Junior college is a tough road.
I barely graduated high school. If it wasn't for my high school wrestling coach who made me go back in and get extra credit stuff, I wasn't a blue chipper out of high school, and here I am.
But Brock left wrestling after that and went on to the WWE and pro wrestling, and eventually the NFL and football, but both sports that don't really have anything to do with mixed martial arts. So when it was announced he was going to be joining the UFC in 2008, there was no doubt he was pretty much underqualified. Yeah, of course he had a background in wrestling, but he had no experience in actual MMA competition, and he was going to be joining the biggest promotion in the sport and competing at the highest level. And goddamn, man, I mean, he did it.
I'm here with one of the most exciting acquisitions ever for the UFC. Brock Lesnar.
Within 2 years and just 4 fights, he was the heavyweight champion, and of course, his wrestling helped, but without a doubt, he was underqualified, and it kind of showed in some of his losses where he turned away from punches just because he wasn't used to taking them. Still made it to a UFC champion though.
I have to pinch myself all the time. I was just a poor dairy farmer kid from Webster, South Dakota.
Number 8, the last picks, Kelvin and Brandon. The Ultimate Fighter has been pretty good at times in churning out UFC talent, but not everyone on the show is as good as each other, and when the coaches pick teams at the start of the season, it's usually the guys that they pick last that you probably aren't going to ever see in the UFC. But there's 2 guys who were picked last and yet went on to reach the very top of the sport. A young Brandon Moreno grew up in Tijuana, Mexico, and after deciding as a teenager that capoeira looked pretty cool, he tried to find a gym, and well, it turned out he couldn't. I mean, he was in the middle of Mexico, but he did stumble across an MMA gym and started training, but it wasn't exactly high-level experience. The coach was just a brown belt, but it still got Moreno to tough. And he wasn't picked last, he was the last seed in a tournament full of champions, all of whom had way more experience in martial arts. Brandon was completely overlooked, and that continued into his UFC career, where he managed to time and time again beat people that had way more experience and training than himself.
Perhaps the biggest underdog to win the Ultimate Fighter in its 17 seasons.
Kelvin Gastelum, on the other hand, had wrestled a bit at high school and won a Division II Arizona championship. He then carried on wrestling for just 1 season at community college before deciding to get into mixed martial arts. And at just 21 years old, Kelvin joined the Ultimate Fighter and was picked last out of anyone, and yet went on to win the whole show. Not only that, but Kelvin went on to beat other great collegiate wrestlers like Rick Story, Jake Ellenberger, and Johnny Hendricks. Both of these guys were literally rated the worst out of the 16 men on their season, with no real high-level backgrounds, and both went on to fight for UFC titles. Number 7, Maurice Smith. So to be fair to the sport, back in the 90s, not many people had what you would call an appropriate amount of mixed martial arts experience. You know, the sport as we know it had just got started, but there were plenty of fighters who had been training since an early age in their disciplines regardless. Maurice Smith wasn't even one of those guys though. He was a kickboxer who didn't start training until 18, and in the 80s he held and defended the WKA heavyweight title multiple times. It's quality stuff, but then he went to K1 in Japan in the 90s to fight against higher level opponents, and he was handed a bunch of losses. That led him into Pancrase, where he was thrown into the world of submissions and wrestling, 2 martial arts that pretty much dominated MMA at the time, and let's just say he did not fare well. After several years abroad, he returned to the US with a record of 3-6 in MMA, but managed to win the Extreme Fighting Heavyweight Championship, but he'd still not beaten any big names. That got him an invitation to the UFC though, and to fight the heavyweight champion of the world and top guy around, Mark Coleman. Maurice's record when he stepped into the cage was just 5-7, and not only was he a massive underdog, but he was seriously underqualified when it came to grappling, which had dominated the UFC up until that point. Still, Smith weathered the storm, didn't get destroyed by Coleman while on his back, and when he ran out of gas, he took over and won the UFC Heavyweight Championship. Number 6, Derek Lewis. Every UFC fan over the last 10 years has probably at some point been entertained by the Black Beast, Derek Lewis, and it's not like he grew up some child prodigy or has been as this super dedicated athlete. In reality, 2 weeks after he graduated high school, Derek was charged with aggravated assault. He went on probation and went to college on a full scholarship for football, but ended up violating the probation and was sentenced to 5 years in prison, where unfortunately he had more altercations.
And so one of the guys came up and just wanted to change the channel. So I didn't say anything to him, and he went back and got up in his bunk, and I just pulled him by his legs from the top bunk and just started beating up on him. I really don't even like talking about all that.
After leaving prison, he developed a background in martial arts by becoming a tow truck driver. I mean, I'm just kidding, but at that time he was introduced to the sport by a friend that led him to seeking out a boxing gym, which led to a meeting with none other than the boxing legend George Foreman.
They wanted me to come to his gym and spar one of his guys, and just to see if I wasn't that good enough to fight his son. And I wound up doing real well against the guy that had me spar. So he wanted me to come up under his wing and try to teach me to box and stuff.
He was going to box, but took an MMA fight and did so well he decided that that was a sport for him. But it wasn't like he suddenly started training MMA properly.
Back then I was just doing Stairmaster and hitting mitts like 3 rounds, no jiu-jitsu or nothing like that. Now I'm running damn near every day.
I mean, let's face it, Derek doesn't grapple, he just stands up. Lewis has definitely changed his attitude since then, but talk about unqualified and still managing to get the most knockouts in UFC history is pretty damn impressive. Number 5, Forrest Griffin. The Forrest Griffin that showed up to compete on the first season of The Ultimate Fighter was one of the most experienced and well-rounded guys on the show, but he didn't exactly start out that way.
No, unfortunately, I never wrestled.
How did you get into the sport then?
I asked myself that a lot.
Forrest hadn't done any kind of combat sports training at all when he stumbled across the sport.
When I was 19, I kind of wasn't good enough to play college football at a high level.
Yep.
And I just needed a sport, and I saw these guys fighting each other, and I thought I could do that.
Forrest graduated at the University of Georgia with a degree in criminal justice and began working there as a police officer, where the police academy incorporated the Gracie grapple system to teach their officers. That was Forrest's first introduction to it, and the instructors were Adam and Rory Singer, who ran the hardcore gym in Athens, and he signed up.
How did you get into it? What did you go and do? Did you go and study Muay Thai, kickboxing,
No,
jiu-jitsu?
there were these guys, and they were doing the no holds barred fighting at the time. So the Singer brothers, the hardcore gym in Athens, they were doing it.
After essentially 1 year of training, Forrest took his first pro fight, which happened to be against Dan Severn for the RSV Heavyweight Championship. He didn't win, but despite having no real athletic background or any kind of martial arts training, Forrest got the experience needed to win the Ultimate Fighter and then even made it to UFC champion. Number 4, Jon Jones. Alright, for some of you who don't know the martial arts background of JBJ, you might be saying, wait a minute, the greatest of all time, underqualified, what on earth do you mean? Well, let's go back to the 90s, when a young Johnny B. Good was at high school and discovering that his long frame was pretty useful for grappling. He won a state championship in New York and went on to wrestle at community college, winning a junior college national championship, but he didn't wrestle at Division I level like so many UFC world champions would do, and he also didn't have some traditional striking background that he developed over a number of years. He is famously a look, see, do fighter, in that he would watch videos of other fighters, copy their techniques, and just do them.
Yeah, you know, it was crazy because George St. Pierre came down in our training camp, and George was working that choke from the front headlock position. I was just watching him do it over and over again as I got to watch George practice that move, and then I did it in the fight today without even ever training it.
I mean, Evan Tanner was a guy who also won a high school wrestling championship and then learnt the rest of his martial arts by watching videotapes and became a UFC champion. But the thing about Jon Jones was, he then absolutely dominated everyone. I mean, a guy who won a high school state championship should not have been able to out-wrestle a multiple-time Olympian, but Jon did, and he was the first man to ever take down Daniel Cormier in MMA. No matter the style or the skill of his opponent, and despite essentially only having a background in high school wrestling, Jon Jones was able to find a way to beat everyone. Number 3, Jimmy Manowa. Okay, let's talk about the poster boy Jimmy Manowa, who at one point carried the flag as one of the UK's best UFC prospects, going 14-0 all by finish and being ranked as high as number 3 in the world. Jimmy was actually born in California and moved to the UK at 10 years old, but didn't have a great time and ended up going to prison for conspiracy to burgle. Being a big guy though, Jimmy worked out a lot and in 2007 suffered a ruptured chest muscle while weightlifting. Because that was no longer on the cards, he looked for something else to do, and at 27 years old started training in martial arts for the first time.
His first day in the gym was typical strong guy, just swinging, big punches, but he had a lot of heart. After a couple months of him doing that, I would say that he had a lot of potential because he picked up and he learned very quickly. And what he was good at, he started to become very good at.
And with literally no experience, Jimmy took a pro fight.
You know what? I'd been training 2 weeks. No kickboxing, no jiu-jitsu, no wrestling, no boxing. I literally walked into this gym, started training my mate. I said to him, yeah, get me a fight. And then he got me a professional fight. And he said, yes, in 2 weeks. I said, sweet, let's do it.
In 2 years, Jimmy was 9-0 with all his wins coming by knockout, mostly in the first round. And he defended the UC MMA belt 5 times, even turning down an offer from UFC so he could get more training in. Honestly, it's not that dissimilar to Francis Ngannou. He started a lot earlier in life, but again, a guy who was able to enter the UFC after a very short amount of time in his career. After just a few years, Jimmy was in the UFC, finished his first 3 opponents, and it catapulted him to the top of the light heavyweight rankings, having spent barely any time in the world of martial arts. Number 2, Matt Brown. Of all the stories we've heard so far, honestly, the immortal Matt Brown's is probably going to be the craziest. Matt has held the record for the most knockouts and has ranked as high as number 6 in the world, but the way he started the sport is honestly kind of hard to believe. He's gone over it in quite a lot of detail with Joe Rogan, so don't mind me if we just kind of let him tell his own story with this one, because Matt basically started fighting before he'd even started training.
I grew up in a machine shop. I was like, man, this is not what I'm meant to be. Everybody around me is like, no, this is what you do. You live in this little town and you follow the rules. All of a sudden, I'm in high school and I have no friends. I have no, I can't get laid for shit. And at the exact same time, I'm starting to experiment with drugs and alcohol.
So Matt grew up uncomfortable in his environment without a real outlet besides drug use, and it very quickly could have ended his life story right there.
I think a lot of people thought that I was addicted to heroin, and I wasn't. That was my step into the dark side. A blessing and a curse, man. You know, it immediately, I was like, oh, okay, that's what can happen, right? It's the step back. I never did heroin again after that, obviously. I think I did oxys, though. My drug of choice was meth back in that day. And that was actually what I was addicted to at one point, and I ended up going to jail, and that was what got me out of addiction.
Matt's only combat sports experience at this point in his life was basically fighting people at parties on drugs or trying to copy VHS instructionals whilst wasted.
I remember watching Ken Shamrock DVDs, leg locks. We'd go on the living room floor, like just be shit-faced drunk, and we're like, oh, this is what he's doing. This is how you do it. And it was always a thought of like, dude, this is fucking awesome, man. Like, I could beat Tank Abbott. Like,
Before he knew it, though, Matt found himself in a position to jump into the world of MMA before he'd really had any actual training, and he took it.
So I fought before I trained. I said, yeah, let's go, man. I want to go with you. I want to see this shit up close, right? I'm doing a bunch of coke on the way, and the guy goes, man, you want to fight the champion? Like, nobody wants to fight him. Fuck yeah, man, I'll fight him. I literally went across the street. There's a sporting goods store across the street, and went and bought a mouthpiece. There's a restaurant across the street, boiled the mouthpiece at the restaurant, used their microwave.
I mean, Matt was literally being taught how to do a jab backstage.
And went out there and I beat the guy. So he actually quit. Yeah, he actually quit, you know, so he was a tough man champion is what he was.
Matt obviously went and sought out proper training eventually, but for a guy that literally started from nothing and became one of the elite welterweights, it's incredibly impressive. Lauren Murphy also has a similar story, getting into the sport late in life to escape drugs and alcohol and making it all the way to a world title. Number 1, Sakuraba. If you aren't familiar with Sakuraba, he was at one point pound for pound the best fighter on the planet and brought Japan to the forefront of mixed martial arts when he started defeating members of the legendary Gracie family who ruled the sport at the time. Now, Saku as a child wanted to be a pro wrestler. It's all he ever wanted, and at 15 he started amateur wrestling. He finished second in the nation at high school. Along with several other Japanese wrestlers, he was also trained in catch wrestling by the Snake Pit guys from the UK. They taught him proper submission techniques, but in essence, Sakuraba was a pro wrestler. He then joined the UWFI, which was a pro wrestling shoot league. It was very technical and realistic, but Sakuraba went completely winless in his first season. He kept working on his craft though until he finally transitioned into mixed martial arts, his first combat sport with basically, well, no real life experience at all. And despite only ever having used those submission moves in a pro wrestling ring, Sakuraba started to dominate the competition. He first won the UFC Ultimate Japan Heavyweight Tournament, submitting a BJJ black belt, and then in Pride truly became a legend as his submission streak continued, all before being matched up against Royler Gracie in an absolutely huge fight for Japanese MMA, where he repeated history 60 years in the making, using a Kimura to defeat a member of the Gracie family in competition for the first time in literal decades. A guy who essentially only ever wanted to be a pro wrestler started to take over the sport. He beat another 3 members of the Gracie family in increasingly high-profile bouts, and these were guys who had been training their entire lives. Some of Sakuraba's Japanese teammates had the same level of training he received, but were unable to make it nearly as effective as Sakuraba, and he rose to the pinnacle of the sport, being considered pound for pound number 1 in the world. Alright, thank you very much for tuning in today as well. Bet you didn't know some of these fighters started from literally nothing and went all the way to world champions, some of them. Shout out to Luke Taylor for editing this video. Thank you, Luke, as well. He's someone who was underqualified, not anymore. He actually does a great job. Look at that. Can you believe it? Give him a shout out and a follow there on social media. _. Check him out if you want to follow some things he does. Guys, if you want to become a channel member here at MMA On Point, I want to tell you from February 1st, we've got a special deal going on. You get access to the weekly meeting where me, Jason, and the team, we discuss ideas for the channel, the videos. You can have your own input on that as well at the writers meeting. You also get access to unedited podcasts and other interviews and stuff that we put up on the channel as well. Also, that's it, you get your name listed in every video as well. But you can check it all out in the link below or click the button to join. If you enjoyed the video today, guys, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Always appreciated. Thank you very much if you want to do that. If you want to see more from us, you can subscribe as well, get updates for all the videos. We do a whole bunch every single week, and we will see you in the next one, guys. Thank you very much. Have a good day.